Protesters around the world call on the United States to lift sanctions on Cuba. Dozens of people have been killed in coordinated attacks by Islamist militants in Mozambique. And Slovakia's Prime Minister said he will resign over a vaccine scandal. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Hundreds of Cubans have formed a caravan in Havana, joining similar ones around the world to demand that the U.S. change its policies and lift a blockade against the island. Hundreds of Cubans took to Havana's famous Seaside Drive on Sunday in a colorful caravan of cars, motorcycles, and bicycles to demand the United States lift its 60-year-old embargo on the Caribbean island nation. The caravan was part of a weekend of protests in more than 50 cities in Europe, Africa, Latin America, and the United States. Figures provided by the United Nations and the Cuban government estimated that the annual losses due to Washington's sanctions between 2019 and 2020 alone reached $5.5 billion. Former U.S. President Donald Trump radically strengthened measures, while Joe Biden said during his election campaign that he will review this policy.
The blockade, the U.S. embargo of Cuba, queues, and the blockade during the COVID-19 pandemic is not only a crime, illegal, immoral, extraterritorial, and gross violation of international law. It reinforces its genocidal character. We are all here in more than 50 cities around the world to say no more blockade.
And in the middle of economic strangulation measures by the United States and the impossibility of negotiating the purchase of vaccines from transnational pharmaceutical companies, Cuba has developed its own vaccines against COVID-19.
This is the prelude to the mass immunization of the Cuban population against COVID-19, to begin next June with the country's own vaccines.
I'm a little nervous, but calm, proud to be able to receive the vaccine after so long.
The final phase of clinical trials of Abdallah and Soberana 02, the two most advanced vaccine candidates of the 5 developed by Cuba, is currently underway with more than 90,000 volunteers. At the same time, an intervention study on 150,000 frontline workers is evaluating the effects of Soberana 02 on populations at risk.
Health workers in a general sense, to test firstly the effectiveness of the vaccine and secondly to decrease the infection rate.
The island is testing its scientific and technological sovereignty in a range of areas, with immunizers using the same recombinant protein technique used by the U.S. biotechnology company Novavax. Cuba is thus projected to be the first country in Latin America and the Caribbean to produce its own vaccine against COVID-19. But if it succeeds, it will make these advances available to other countries in the region.
Beyond the fact that we can benefit financially, which is not what motivates us, it is our pride to have candidates for vaccination. It ratifies who we are and how we are. The fact that our product will be on the international market competing with so many other companies of such high renown is a reason for us to be proud.
As part of these trials and preliminary studies, Cuba's authorities expect more than 2 million people to be immunized before June, including all the inhabitants of the capital, in the month of May.
I am afraid of it, because it is not the same for me to administer it to a patient as it is for them to give it to me. But well, as long as it is for my own good and for the good of society, I am here for that.
Once the emergency use of these drugs has been authorized, the intervention studies for the whole country will continue according to sector. In August, it is expected that more than half of the Cuban population of 11.2 million will have been vaccinated, and all the island's inhabitants by the end of 2021.
Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaidó has tested positive for COVID-19. Guaidó made the announcement on his Twitter account on Saturday night, saying that his symptoms are currently mild. The opposition politician contracted the disease during the second wave of the pandemic in Venezuela, which health officials describe as more contagious and is likely linked to the Brazilian variant of the virus. Guaidó is in self-isolation at his home. Chile has started a strict and extensive coronavirus lockdown as the country hits a new daily infections record. More than 80% of the country's 19 million inhabitants, including all residents of the capital Santiago, have been put under a strict lockdown that prevents them leaving the house, even to buy groceries or pharmacy supplies. Only 169 intensive care beds remain available nationwide, which is an occupancy rate of more than 95%. Nearly half of the country's population has received at least one vaccine dose. However, on Friday, Chile recorded 7,626 new cases over a 24-hour period, which is the highest total at any point during the pandemic.
Police are continuing with sanitary controls throughout the country. The record of the last 24 hours is of 1,300 detainees who did not abide by the sanitary norms.
A Bolivian court has rejected an appeal by former President Yanine Añez and upheld a ruling that she must remain in preventive detention. A judge last week ordered that Añez be detained for 6 months after a hearing in which the allegations against her were outlined, including that she used security forces allies to push Morales to resign after contested elections and eventually install herself as interim president. Añez and her energy and justice ministers face charges of terrorism, sedition, and conspiracy over the 2019 coup against former President Evo Morales. At least one person has died and another got injured after 5 tank trucks transporting fuel caught fire in Peru. The trucks were traveling on Peru's central highway on Saturday when rocks falling from the hills hit one of them, which spilled fuel and fire that engulfed the others in the convoy and cars in the area. Firefighters and first responders worked in the area after closing the road near kilometer 85 in San Mateo district. Paraguay has imposed new tougher restrictions in an effort to curb growing coronavirus infections. Between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m., locals are only allowed to go out for essential activities as the pandemic continues to put the South American country's health service under severe strain. Those outside their homes during curfew hours are subject to questioning and arrest. The new restrictions will remain in place until April 4, but can be extended depending on the situation. We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. Dozens of people have been killed in coordinated attacks by the Islamist militants in northern Mozambique. The government is yet to retake control of the city. However, hundreds of people, both locals and foreigners, have been rescued from the town Palma.
Last Wednesday, March 24th, a group of terrorists sneaked into the main town of Palma and launched actions that result in the cowardly murder of dozens of defenseless people and caused material damage to some government infrastructures.
Zimbabwe has started rolling out the second stage of its vaccination campaign using COVID-19 vaccines donated by China. The initial phase of Zimbabwe's vaccination plan started on February 18th after the country received its first batch of the Sinopharm vaccines donated by China, giving priority to inoculate health workers and frontline workers. The second batch was delivered in mid-March, helping the country to kickstart its second phase, which includes teachers, religious leaders, and those with underlying conditions.
Then after that, they assigned their own Chinese doctor who is here, who was working with us. We had experience from Wuhan with working with patients with COVID. And they even brought other doctors and nurses and therapists to help us deal with the pandemic. They were a real strength, a pillar of strength for us as we were working on the COVID pandemic.
China has been a boon to Africa. Africa has always suffered from being late to come into the Industrial Revolution, so we had no capital.
Madagascar's former president Didier Ratsiraka has died at the age of 84. Ratsiraka, a former naval officer and one of the promoters of socialist revolution on the island, was in power from 1975 into 1991 and returned from another stint from 1997 to 2002. He was well known for having close ties to the late North Korean ruler Kim Il-sung and Cuban leader Fidel Castro. After a contested election, demonstrations and armed clashes broke out from December 2001 to July 2002 between the supporters of Ratsiraka and those of his new opponent, Marc Ravalomanana. Ravalomanana was later declared the winner, and Ratsiraka was forced into exile in France for 9 years. Tunisians have gathered in the streets of Sossou to demand the return of household waste illegally exported to the country from Italy. In 2020, Tunisian custom officials seized 282 containers that have been shipped from Italy and declared as carrying plastic scrap from industrial cycling. But the containers were found to hold a mix of household waste, which is barred from import under Tunisian law. Italian authorities have given the Italian firm that sold the waste 90 days to retrieve the cargo from December 9, but the deadline passed without it doing so. Tunisian conservation groups criticized the inaction of both sides.
There are currently 212 containers in Pier 4 at the port of Sousse. There are also 69 containers containing waste at the importing company's warehouse in Mouradine, which is considered an environmental catastrophe.
Hundreds of Lebanese protesters have rallied in the capital Beirut against a political stalemate that has denied the country a government for months. The protests organized by Lebanon's Communist Party block traffic in central Beirut, and Lebanon is now facing an unprecedented economic crisis that has sent the local currency on a descending spiral where prices soar and poverty increase. But political groups have been locked into a power struggle, failing to agree on forming a government to deal with the crisis. Lebanon's government resigned in August following a massive explosion at Beirut's port that killed 211 people, wounded more than 6,000, and damaged entire neighborhoods in the capital.
It is a protest against what's going on in the political issues in Lebanon, as well as economical situations. The government, as well as the parliament, are seizing all the authorities and are depriving the people of all its rights: the right of living well, the right of having hospitality, having insurance, having money, having income. All these are depriving them, the people.
At least 5 people have been killed and dozens injured after a 9-story building collapsed in Egypt's capital, Cairo. It was not immediately clear what caused the building's collapse, and government officials said they're investigating the issue. Rescue workers were still searching for any survivors trapped under the rubble. The government has recently launched a crackdown on illegal building across the country, jailing violators and in many cases destroying the buildings.
When the diggers arrived at the site, they expanded the area and pushed people away and started working, searching for survivors. While I was there, they removed 4 bodies. They could see others, but they couldn't bring them out.
Meanwhile, a giant container ship remains stuck sideways in Egypt's Suez Canal for a 6-day Saturday, as authorities prepare to make new attempts to free the vessel and reopen a crucial east-west waterway for global shipping. According to local authorities, a maritime traffic jam grew to around 280 vessels Saturday outside Suez Canal. This means that about $10 billion worth of goods are now blocked. And we'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Slovakia's Prime Minister has announced that he will step down to clear the way for a cabinet reshuffle triggered by a vaccine scandal. Prime Minister Igor Matovic said Finance Minister Eduard Heger accepted his offer of swapping posts. Heger said he will immediately open talks with coalition partners on a new possible government and the political crisis erupted when a secret deal came to light 3 weeks ago involving Slovakia's agreement to acquire 2 million doses of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. The purchase was made without the approval of the two parties making up the center-right coalition. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has announced that he was going to resign in April, but he will remain in office until the parliamentary elections due on June 20th. The country has been gripped by political crisis since Pashinyan in November signed a Russian ceasefire agreement with Azerbaijan that ended 6 weeks of fighting for the control of the region in dispute.
Yes, first of all, I will resign in April. Why? I will resign not to resign, but in order for early elections to take place. And in the meantime, I will continue to serve as interim Prime Minister.
Albania has started a mass vaccination campaign after acquiring 192,000 doses of the Chinese coronavirus vaccine, Sinovac. Hundreds of people aged 70 and above gathered at Tirana's main square to get a jab. Vaccination has proceeded slowly in Albania before the arrival of the Sinovac vaccine, with the Balkan nation receiving less than 100,000 Pfizer, AstraZeneca and Sputnik V doses. The country has inoculated 65,000 medical personnel, teachers, and people aged 80 and over so far.
I was waiting for this day and thank God it came. My husband is having the shot at the ambulance center because he's older than 80, while I am having it here at Skanderberg Square, both in one day, and we are so pleased.
North Macedonia has received its first batch of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines through the COVAX initiative. A shipment of 24,000 doses landed at the country's main airport near the capital Skopje. According to health authorities, the first 20,000 people who will be immunized with the shipment will be those over 75 and chronically ill. The vaccination process will start from Wednesday next week. North Macedonia has been struggling with a shortage of vaccines and has barely started its mass vaccination drive. The batch is in addition to 11,000 doses of Pfizer and Russian Sputnik V received last month.
Our expectations with regards to the time of delivery have not been fulfilled, as this shipment has arrived after several weeks of delay. But having in mind the global demand for vaccines from all over the world, having in mind that all countries of the world are faced with this problem, I think it's good that this COVAX system works as it was foreseen.
Thousands have protested in Turkey, calling on the president to reverse his decision to withdraw from the world's first binding treaty to stop violence against women. Protesters have taken to the streets of Istanbul for the second straight weekend to protest against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's decision to withdraw from the 2011 Istanbul Convention. The treaty, signed by 45 countries and the European Union, requires governments to adopt legislation prosecuting domestic violence and similar abuse, as well as martial rape and female genitalia mutilation. The protests came into the face of fresh anger in Turkey after a 17-year-old pregnant girl was stabbed to death. The suspect was reported to be the man she was living with. At least a dozen people were injured in clashes between police and Islamist demonstrators in Bangladesh. Protesters, mostly from the Islamist group Hezayat-e-Islam, were angry at the visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as Bangladesh marks 50 years of independence. They are accusing him of stoking communal violence against Muslims on his country. Since the protests started on Friday, at least 11 people have died after police shots at demonstrators in several districts across the Muslim-majority nation. 14 people have been injured after a suicide bomber blew himself up outside a Catholic cathedral on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. The attackers targeted the church as the congregants were taking part in a Palm Sunday Mass. According to security forces, 2 motorists approached the church and one of them detonated his explosives after being confronted by guards. He died near the church gate while 4 guards and 5 civilians were wounded. Police are still investigating the affiliation of the attackers.
kejadian ada ledakan.
There was indeed an explosion, and from the location of the explosion, we found pieces and pieces of bodies. While we are still exploring whether it came from the perpetrators or someone from around him, now we are still collecting the body parts, and it's not certain how many people were victims.
Myanmar security forces reportedly killed 93 people on Saturday in the deadliest day since last month's military coup. Soldiers and police in Myanmar used lethal force to suppress the latest protests against last month's coup, with scores of people reportedly killed across the country. The death toll in Myanmar has been rising as authorities grew more forceful with the suppression of opposition to February 1st coup that ousted the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. According to the Assistant Association of Political Prisoners, at least 328 people have been killed in the post-coup crackdown so far.
That is not justice, that is a brutalities, that is a massacre. Why UN stay waiting for anything? We call it that. How many dead bodies UN need to take action on those issues? Right now, we hoping the international society do not silent, but speak out is not enough for us. We need real assistance. Today, you can see that military is doing that brutality of the killing. How many times, how many people are needed to show that is a massacre and that is a human atrocity. So that's why we want an international society just only saying condemning, just saying subtly, just saying about releasing the statement is not enough. We need a dual respectful supportive to us.
A woman has been killed and 6 others injured in a stabbing attack in Canada's North Vancouver. A 20-year-old man went on a stabbing spree in and around a library, killing one woman before being apprehended by the police. There is currently no information about the motive. According to local authorities, the suspect has no interactions with the police in the past. And cities around the world turned off their lights Saturday for Earth Hour. For this year, organizers say they wanted to highlight the link between the destruction of the natural world and the increasing incidence of diseases such as COVID-19, making the leap from animals to humans. Experts say human activity such as widespread deforestation, destruction of animal habitats, and climate change are spurring this increase, and warn that more pandemics could occur if nothing is done. And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.